And it's being called cheap political point scoring, a manoeuvre by a man in trouble. Is that the case?
It's an interesting point because obviously I don't think anyone reasonable could say that the situation of spending around £2 billion a month on testing could go on forever. So the question is when, not if, do we scale back this sort of infrastructure? And I think that broadly there's an argument that the original plan to scale it back in March or April, as is the plan, is sort of the one that has been on the table. To announce it now seems relatively in line with that plan. The question would be, when would it happen otherwise? When would be the point at which this started to be scaled back? Would political opposition like to wait for the summer, perhaps, to see if the steps of winding down the legal obligation to self-isolate would have an effect on cases? Perhaps that's an argument, but ultimately the bottom line is that £2 billion was spent on testing. It's incredibly expensive in January. More than that was spent in December on testing. This is a huge amount of money that may well be better spent in other parts of the NHS.
That's true, but there will be people who make the argument, not least those on the Labour benches, that actually you're creating a class divide in relation to who can access testing, because I think a pack of 6 lateral flows is about £20 or something. We're in a cost of living crisis. Many people won't have £20 to spare a few times every month.
They certainly won't, but also taxpayers won't have the cash to spare in a year's time when it all needs to be paid for. Ultimately, someone has to fit the bill. There's no magic solution here whereby no one needs to pay. It's funny, the same group of people who would often criticise the £37 billion budget of test and trace, the vast majority of which went on testing. The tracing is a very small fraction of that 37 billion, despite the fact that many of those voicing opposition to that 37 billion seem to imply it all went on tracing. No, the vast majority of it went on testing and is going on testing. So if you're going to complain about that £37 billion spend, surely the logical solution to that is to spend less, is to do this broad surveillance-style testing, as happens through the ONS, as will be continuing, that's more cost-effective and gives government a granular picture of where in the country the issue is and how the epidemic is doing, or indeed how it's spreading and if there is an issue, and being able to sequence, but not providing particularly these lateral flow tests, which are quite expensive and you can't even sequence. That's the issue.
And they're not very reliable sometimes, are they, either? That's one of the problems with lateral flow tests.
Well, some countries didn't authorise them in the first place. I think there is a great degree of reliability. Of course, it's not 100%. No test is 100% reliable. But I think many people did find them useful, particularly around the Omicron wave. But, of course, these will be able... They're not going away. People will still be able to buy them in shops. And there are still some negotiations to happen between the government and private providers in terms of what price points these may be at. Perhaps smaller packs may be able to be provided even more cheaply. Employers may well be still handing them out to employees as well. I think we're still going to see testing in this country. It's just not at a cost of £2 billion a month to the taxpayer.